Shabbat Shalom. I am so delighted to be here with Elias, Michelle, and Dan in our favorite space, the Gann Chapel. We are taping on Wednesday morning, February the 7th. This is showing on Shabbat, February the 10th, which is the Shabbat right before the Super Bowl weekend. And I bring that up because I want to kind of frame our content today with a football story. Several years ago, the San Francisco 49ers made a bold decision. They decided to trade 3 first-round draft picks to move up in the draft because they made a decision that they wanted the quarterback of the future to be a guy named Trey Lance. Trey Lance played for a small college. He only played 1 full year before the pandemic. But on the basis of that 1 year that he played, they felt like, wow, this guy is going to be special. So special, we're going to trade our future, mortgage our future to get him. So they made this very bold decision. They drafted Trey Lance, thinking that he was going to be their superstar. As an afterthought, with their last draft pick, they drafted another quarterback named Brock Purdy. And the person who gets picked last in the NFL draft earns a moniker which is Mr. Irrelevant. So they drafted Trey Lance, third player in the pick, and they drafted Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. As it would turn out, Trey Lance was a very big disappointment. He was injured often. He didn't play very well when he played. And they gave up on him and traded him to Dallas for a single draft pick. And then Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, ended up, of course, leading them to the Super Bowl, which is going to be taking place tomorrow. The question is, what do we learn from this? And what we learn from this is making decisions is often very challenging. And you don't know what you get until you got it. And that's true for professional football teams trying to pick talent. And despite all the talent and all the millions of dollars and the scouts, they make a pick, and it turns out to be wrong. And then the pick that they didn't even think about that much turned out to be very, very right in ways they wouldn't have anticipated. Our question today is, when you move from football to life, how do we think about those decisions that we make and we don't know what we got until we got it? And that could be where we live, that could be the profession that we're in, that could be the person that we married, that could be having children, that could be dealing with an illness. Along our journey, there are all of these decision points, and we never really know when we make the decision. And our reading today is the address for how to think about that phenomenon. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'harev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael, k'niyeh anachnu v'tzatza'enu v'tzatza'ei amcha beit Yisrael, Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei toratecha lishma, Baruch atah Adonai hamalamed Torah la'amo Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah. So, dear colleagues, the way I want to kind of access this question about we never really know what we get until after we got it is a very granular read of just a couple of verses from the Torah. This is going to be a different kind of class because it's going to be just a close textual read, really, of a few verses. 7 verses in total, but this is about when the people of Israel say yes to God's Torah. And it turns out that the phrase that gets a lot of press is na'aseh v'nishmah. We will obey and then we will do, or we will obey and then we will learn. Na'aseh v'nishma gets a lot of press, but if you read the text closely, they actually just say na'aseh, we will do, and then a few verses later they say na'aseh v'nishma. And I want to kind of unpack. It feels a little nerdy, but I want to unpack the difference between na'aseh and na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will do and we will learn, and what that teaches us. So, just real quick, like a few verses. This is Exodus 24. Then God said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord with Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and 70 elders of Israel, and bow low from afar. Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but the others shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him. Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of the Lord and all the rules. And all the people answered with one voice, saying, all the things that the Lord has commanded, we will do. Moses then wrote down all the commands of the Lord. So note, first of all, colleagues, the leitmotif of kol, all, right? Vayavo Moshe v'yesaper la'am, 8, kol divrei Adonai. Moses came and related to the people, kol divrei Adonai, all the words of the Lord. Vet kol hamishpatim, all of the statutes. Vayan kol ha'am, and all of the nation answered kol echad, one voice. Vayamru kol hadavarim asher diber Adonai na'aseh. They said that all of the things that God said, commanded, we will do. And then vayachtov Moshe kol divrei Adonai, and Moses writes it down. Then, early in the morning, Moses set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the tribes of Israel. He designated some young men among the Israelites, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as offerings of well-being to the Lord. Moses took one part of the blood and put it in the basins, and the other part of the blood he dashed against the altar. Then he took the record of the covenant and read it aloud to the people, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken we will faithfully do. So just an addition of one word, Vayru kol asher diber Adonai na'aseh v'nishmah. So all that God has commanded, we will na'aseh v'nishmah. That's verse 7. In verse 4, it's the same exact verse, except Vayru kol ha'am asher diber Adonai na'aseh. All that God has commanded, we will do. So it seems like the Torah here is making some important point by repeating the same line, but in the first case it's just na'aseh, and in the second case it's na'aseh v'nishma. Na'aseh v'nishma, by the way, is translated variously as we will certainly do, or we will faithfully do, or we will do and we will learn. So, colleagues, what is going on?
A couple of things I want to say. First of all, I love the Hebrew here, where after all these calls, which means everything, there is a call with kof, that is the voice. I love how they sound exactly the same and they are different. That's to begin with. Second, this is, when he talks about the 70 elders of Israel, this is a perfect recipe for clergy who want to be successful with a board. You come and you say, God told me to do that, and then all of them say, yes, we will do as you said. That would be perfect in the world, right?
Yes, and that works very well. Yes. Michelle, what's going on here?
So I agree with you, Elias. Just so beautiful here. But secondly, I love how Moses writes it all down in between. And I always have this image of, the first time they hear him and they're like, yeah, we're going to do it. They're kind of at a rally. They're very excited and brought up by everything that he said, but they don't quite know all that he said. And the next time I feel like, in between, Moses gave them a lot of homework. And they see now they have this big book, and maybe they're pausing for a second and saying, oh, yes, we're going to do it. And we got to take some time to figure out what it means.
Right. So the first time it's oral. Moses says it, and they say na'aseh. The second time Moses writes it down, gives them a syllabus, gives them a binder, gives them a lot of pages, and they say na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will say, or we will do and we will learn. But here's, so there's something different between oral and written, that's for sure, oral Torah and written Torah. But what is as you experience na'aseh and then na'aseh v'nishma, either it's an emphatic, exclamation mark, we will certainly do, we will faithfully do, or we will do and we will learn, or we will do and we will understand. What to you is the force of the v'nishma in the context of the story?
To me, the first thing that comes to mind, And I don't know, Wes, if you want to take the class in that direction. We had Daniel Hartman here on Monday. He was amazing. You can listen to him all day long. And he said something that, I wasn't ready to hear, which was that after the attack of October 7, Israel went all in, attacking Hamas, all right? And there are some criticism in Israel that they didn't have a strategy for that they didn't think first what to do. They reacted with a kishkes, and we are going to destroy them and kill them all.
Right.
And that is something that comes to mind if Naaseh Nishma would have been something, helpful in those days, or even nishmah. I mean, let's first talk about it and then we'll act on it.
Right. Yeah, so I think, right, so let's just back up, and I definitely want to talk about Israel very much, but I think the nishmah piece of Naaseh Nishma is that you have a greater understanding based on doing. Like first you do, and then after you do, you understand. So, take marriage. No couple under their chuppah could begin to understand what it's like to be married for 20, 30, 40, 50 years with all the ups and all the downs and all the wonderful things and all the inevitable disappointments and shatterings of life. What does it mean to weather all that together? No couple could know that when they're in their 20s or 30s and standing under the chuppah. But when when you've been married for a good number of years and you've been through that together, then you get nishmah. So what you're really saying under the chuppah is naaseh. We're going to do this together. You don't get naaseh v'nishmah. You don't get what that even means until you've been married for a while. And then after you're married 40 years, like, whoa, now I get it. The same thing, by the way, raising kids, right? God gives you a blessing of a child, and you're just so delighted. You hold this baby, and you're so delighted. What's it going to mean, the ups and the downs and the joys and the frustrations of parenting children through all the ages and stages? There's no way you know that in the labor and delivery room. You only know that many, many years later. So I think that's the sense of nishmah, that first you do, and then you come to understand what it means only with a lot of experience.
Yeah, in a personal situation for me, the biggest decision, obviously, that I made in my life was not to marry Lorena or to accept the job at Temple Emmanuel. It was to emigrate.
Right.
Right, to leave everything, and that's it's a terrible decision you have to make, or a good decision, but you have no idea how your life is going to play out.
Right.
And that to me is the most resonating with my personal story.
Right, and you made the decision to move to America without knowing what the decision to move to America would feel like, would be like, etc. And I think that's a dramatic example of it. But really, all of us face those kinds of decisions. You move to any place. It's obviously much bigger when you're switching countries and languages and cultures and all that. But even you go from West Coast to East Coast or anywhere, it's you went, Michelle, from California to Boston, etc. I went from Denver to Boston. It's moving is.
You went from Brookline to Newton.
You went from Brookline. So Michelle and Dan, when you think about v'nishmah, what is it saying to each of you about the process of making decisions and then sticking with the decisions we've made?
I want to actually, that's great. It is really, really complex. Right? Virtually every decision that you make, you're never going to know the outcome. And like for instance, the decision for Sue and I to adopt, we didn't know what the outcome was going to be.
Right.
You have no idea what it's going to be like. And then,
Can we just double click on that, Dan? Because you think like you're going to go to China and bring Emma Rose back to Newton, such a humongous decision, and you have no idea what that's going to look like or feel like or be like. And right, and so I think that's yes. And so it is with all this, even getting married to Sue to begin with, getting married to our partners to begin with. Like the biggest decisions we have to make, they're all kind of a leap of faith.
Yes, right. The other thing I want to point out is what Elias pointed out, and you're talking about like nerdy on the text, right? So the first time, it's kol ha'am, says na'aseh.
Right.
The second time, it doesn't say kol ha'am na'aseh v'nishma. So the word kol is missing the second time. So so I'm thinking about okay, the first time, as Michelle said, yes, it's a big rally cry, na'aseh, 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 and then Moses reads all the laws, and they say, oh, as you pointed out, oh, wait a minute, there's like about 150 things we have to remember on a daily basis, according to this, and so maybe we're not as all in as we thought we were going to be from the beginning.
Right. Picking up on that, Dan, nase v'nishma to me has always represented kind of an orientation towards life. That first you say yes, and then you understand that you have work to do, and I think that's so important and profound as we navigate all these moments, right? As you're here in America, and I remember when you became a citizen here, and what an extraordinary moment that was. And this year you've lost your mother, and what a painful moment that is to have been separated for so long, and neither of those things could you have imagined, and both of those things you worked at each day. Your relationship with your mom on, each Shabbat Alive, I would see you there, and certainly becoming an American citizen and understanding what America means. I've watched you work at that day after day, even as you're parenting your kids, and so I think the nishmah for me has always represented all that hard work that we do once we make the decision.
Right. I want to just go back to the biblical story for a second, because after the people, what do you do with the following? Which is, after the people say, na'aseh v'nishma, the rest of the story is not that they actually faithfully do everything God wants, but the biblical narrative is that they just regularly violate what God wants. I mean, the whole story of the people of Israel and God is a story of disappointment, that they're always a whoring after the Midianites, or they build the golden calf, or they're always complaining, or they're violating, or they're lusting after other gods, etc. So how do you fit that into the story? That they all say na'aseh, they say na'aseh v'nishma, and then, in fact, there's a lot of backsliding. And then, in fact, regularly, the main motif is not that they do it, but that they fail to do it. What do we get from all that?
Well, I love your point there, Dan, right? There is a missing kol, right? There's some part, yeah, okay, now that we see the syllabus,
right,
it's a little harder to try to do this.
But even fundamentally, it wasn't the niceties that they missed. Like, we talked about this last week. They did the golden calf. Or in Numbers 25, they have a sexual orgy with the Midianites. So it's not like minor points they miss, like major points they miss.
But it's like that joke that we sometimes tell before the kids. It's not that funny, but you'll often stand before the ark with our little preschoolers here and talk to them about how God first brought the Torah to the, name your people that you would throw in here, all of the ites throughout. And they said, what's in it? Right? And oh, no, thank you. I don't want, oh, you mean no idolatry? No, thank you. Right? No, I have to be nice to the people around me? No, thank you. Right. That there is this force of Torah that asks a huge amount from us, not just on the little details, but even on the big ones that are not just sometimes, but often hard for us to live up to or even want to live up to.
Yeah, and what I want to ask you is, does the fact that the Israelites regularly fail, according to the biblical narrative, they regularly fail at upholding their commitments, and not on the niceties, but on the big points, like don't have other gods besides me, they fail at that. Does that make it more helpful and more accessible, or less? So I want to just, I was thinking about a conversation I had with my daughter, who's training to be a therapist, and she's been working with substance abuse disorders. They don't call them, at least in California where she's getting trained, they don't call it addiction, because that's it's more pejorative. They call it substance abuse disorders. And one of the cardinal teachings that she shared with me is that they tell the therapists who are working with somebody who is a substance abuse disorder, to alcohol or to drugs or to really serious stuff, that everybody gets a C in terms of following through on their commitments. And they tell them that at the outset. There's, let's say, you decide that you want to be sober, and you decide you want to stop with the alcohol, that they're told in advance, you're going to get a C in that, because it kind of presumes that people fall off the wagon. And that it's not like you make your commitment and then you're done and you're just, everything is smooth sailing, that the system assumes people get a C, they make a commitment, they fall off the wagon, they remake the commitment, they fall off the wagon, etc. And when she shared that with me, I thought about the story of the biblical Israelites who say na'aseh, nishmah, and who then build the golden calf. What do you think about, how do you think about failure in terms of the decisions that we make, failure in terms of upholding our commitments?
Well, I think that we are talking more here about universal condition of human beings, not so much about Jewish people in this case, since you brought what your daughter is training to be with. It's nature. I mean, if we would be robots, like we commit to something and we do it perfectly every single day, and we have routines and we never deviate from that. I don't think humans can fit in that category.
Right.
One of the glorious things about Naseh v'Nishma from a midrashic perspective is that we don't say first what's in it and then we'll do it. Right? Usually you ask what are the terms and conditions.
Right.
We didn't do that. We said we're in. We're in. Okay, now we're going to learn, and that is such a beautiful template for our life. And yet when you don't know what you've accepted, when you don't know the challenges of the road ahead, it's very easy to get that C.
Michelle, let me ask you a question as a mother. When you go at home and you tell your children, kids, dinner is served. In my house, they say, what's for dinner? Yeah. They never say, thank you. What's for dinner? It's like, it's there. It's human condition to ask and to. I mean, I love our people, Israel, the ones who wrestles with God constantly through generations. We've been doing that.
But you're saying, Michelle, that when you say yes before you know what you're saying yes to, that it makes the C more likely, because it turns out maybe this.
And I think with the addiction metaphor that you spoke to, I think that's really true, because whenever you say yes, every January 1st, right, everybody's going and they're kicking all their habits.
Right.
And then the hard piece comes in. And if you don't expect that hard piece, if somebody didn't say to you at the outset, hey, by the way, you're going to reach a point where that rally, where all those people with you are you're not feeling the energy anymore of that, and you have to encounter a real profound lack or a desire that is unfulfilled, or a template or a habit that is ingrained, and you have to uproot it. When you get to that point, you don't know yet what you're going to need to bring with you.
Right.
And if you don't have some kind of a sense to prepare for that moment, then you can't meet that moment.
It's sort of what is happening with our kids in Israel that go to Gaza.
Right. So actually, let's pivot for a second to Israel, because I do want to think about Daniel and our response to that. For those who weren't at Daniel's lecture, it was super sober, super somber, and super unflinchingly honest. And here's what Daniel said, and he's made similar kind of points in his podcast, but this was really very out there, and he was there in person, so it landed with a particular forcefulness. He said that there's a limit to Israel's power, and that for Israel's very serious problems, it does not have solutions to solve these problems. It doesn't have a solution for Hamas, which after 120 plus days of war, Daniel's number was that we've gotten to 20% of the tunnels. 4 months later, 80% of the tunnels are undisturbed. And Daniel made the point, very sobering indeed, that once the army got out of the north of Gaza, Hamas went back into the north of Gaza. And then he said it's much worse even with Hezbollah, that they have all these kinds of missiles that are super sophisticated, super effective, and that Iron Dome cannot solve. And he pointed out that the Israeli town of Metula, 25% of the housing has already been destroyed by Hezbollah's missiles, and that Israel has no answer for that. And so I said to him, when I was in dialogue with him, one of his cardinal precepts is, I don't do pessimism. I said, how do you not do pessimism, given what you just said? And his answer is, you live. And then he goes on to say that he now packs heat. He carries a gun, and Monday is his grandfather day. He's Baba, and he takes his grandchildren to the Israeli version of Jamboree. And when he goes to Jamboree, he packs heat. And when he sees other parents, like a young mom with 3 kids at Jamboree, she's packing heat. And that he find that just is. Zionism is dealing with what just is, and Israelis have to be vigilant. And then he goes on to say, and then I will come back to you guys, that when he thinks about the heroes of the Jewish people, he said he himself came from a family that did not have immediate relatives who died in the Shoah, but he thinks the heroes of Jewish history are the survivors of the Shoah who lost what they lost, and they decided to affirm life anyway. They lost what they lost, and they got married anyway. They lost what they lost, and they decided to bring children into the world anyway. And he said it's because of that survivor courage that the Jewish people continued after the Holocaust. And he said that's what Israel and Israelis need to tap into now. So that, to now come back to Na'aseh v'nishmah, and you don't know what you got until you got it. And you don't know what marriage is until you're 40 years into it. And you don't know what raising children is until you're 40 years into it. And you don't know what Israel is until you're 75 years into it. And what he's saying is that 75 years into Israel, what we now know is to be in Israel is to have serious menace, existential menace. Oh, but he also said Israel has enemies that are brutal. Israel has enemies that slaughter children. And they're getting more vicious, and they're getting more talented at being vicious. And that just is. And that 75 years into it, to be in Israel means to pack heat when you go to Jamboree. But therefore, you're not doing pessimism because you're living. So, Na'aseh v'nishmah, like, wow, that's to be a Zionist 75 years later. Colleagues, what came up for you when you heard that?
Yeah, just to light up a little bit about that sovereign reality is when he said, God gave us the promised land. Really?
Yeah.
He could have chosen any other place that would be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cruel reality of living in the Middle East, and we are constantly saying prayers for the IDF and these kids who are 20, 21, 19, 22, who go to the front, go inside Gaza like your nephew. And they don't know what's going to be. They don't know if they are going to come back. It's so sad.
Yeah, so Israel, Michelle, you and Mike met in Israel. Your parents live in Israel. You're such a Zionist. But here, Na'aseh v'nishmah, we don't know what it means to be a Zionist until you've been one for 75 years. What do you do with that now?
That's a question that all of us are trying to answer. It's certainly one I'm answering for myself as I check my WhatsApp each morning to try to check in on my parents and, think about them there. I think we're preparing to, God willing, send you all off tomorrow, right?
Yeah, we're going to Israel tomorrow, yeah.
You're going tomorrow to Israel
at
Gan Academy. My kid, God willing, will be able to go with Gan in May. So we're thinking about the ways that, as Danielle charged us, we can just show up and be part of the family and be there in Israel with Israelis. And it's really hard from here. It's hard from here.
Yeah. Dan, what about you? You have a brother who lives in Israel. Mm-hmm. When you hear what Danielle says, packing heat to go to Jamboree, what are you thinking about?
Well, that's been my brother's modus operandi for all his life. He's
your brother walks with a gun?
Yeah, always. He served in the Israeli army. He was in Lebanon 3 times in the 80s. And he always is vigilant about that. He takes his grandchildren to the pool, to the to other events, always with weapons, and his children also carry weapons all the time. So that's the reality that they've lived for their entire lives. Maybe harder now, but that has always been his.
I find that personally, I've been very rattled, I think is the word I would use, ever since I heard Daniel say that. Somehow the notion of having to pack heat to go to Jamboree, what rattles me about it is, how do you sell that to a future to a Jewish generation that would have a choice? If you're a 20-something beginning your life and you have a choice, how can Israel compete in the marketplace of choices if the choice is, okay, you could live in Newton or Brookline or Malibu, California, or Denver, Colorado, or Austin, Texas, and you can go to Jamboree without a gun. All those places have their own problems and school shootings, and Lord knows America is hardly perfect, and Lord knows America obviously has a huge gun problem. But still, the notion that there's somebody who wants to slaughter my children is not part of our landscape, and Israel is what it is. So I've been very rattled about how does Israel continue to generate a new generation of people who want to live there, given that. And I guess my question to you is, na'aseh v'nishmah, does the Torah have any consolation for us? Does the Torah have any leavening wisdom for us as we think about the complexities of, we make a commitment, I love you, honey, I'm going to marry you. I love you, child, I'm going to raise you. I love you, mission or profession or work, I'm going to devote my life to you. I love you, Israel, I'm going to be in a lifelong relationship with you. And as it gets harder and harder or more complex over the years, more and more challenges, what's the leavening wisdom of na'aseh v'nishmah as we close this class out?
So I think that phrase is actually exactly what we need these days. Because in America, we have this blessing that we can plan the future. We can say, in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'll retire. I'll drive my Ferrari. Well, it's just a dream. Anyways, I'll retire in Florida. We have that ability because life in a certain way is predictable, right? Our Israeli relatives and friends don't have that. And this idea that what's going to be the future of Israel in 5-10 years will be peace, will be two states, is too far out from us. We have to concentrate day by day. Na'aseh v'nishmah works out really well now.
Yeah, and to me, that first na'aseh, I think of the word Scandinavia that Danielle used so often. Scandinavia. We had this image that we could be in the Middle East like Scandinavia, and that is the dream, and that is the hope, and that is that first na'aseh. Like na'aseh, we're going to be here, and we're going to turn this into the beacon. This is Or LaGoyim. This is the place that we're going to make that's going to be like Scandinavia. We're going to create, better, right? We're going to create a world here, high-tech nation, startup nation. What emanates from here is going to change the world in such a positive way. And then that's na'aseh, right? And then you have that second na'aseh v'nishmah, which maybe, although we've been talking about it like all the things that you don't know and you have to go and learn them, there's another way to look at it entirely, which is this time, not kol, we have ha'am. The people now say, okay, we're going to do it nonetheless. We're going to keep returning to this place, and God willing, there will be another generation. I agree with you. It's very unsettling when you look at how's the next generation going to buy into this, that dream of only high-tech nation.
Right.
If that wasn't our end point, if we're knocked off of that, where do we go? We need another generation that comes and says, okay, I see that, na'aseh, and I'll do it, and I'll keep learning, I'll keep trying, I'll keep working towards, God willing, whatever will be in this place.
Thank you, Michelle. Dan, what's your What do you take away from Na'aseh Nishma in this challenging season?
Yeah, I'm very similar to what Michelle said. There's a wonderful Yiddish expression, im ein brera, ze oicha brera. Having no choice. If you have no choice, that's your choice. The choice is that you have to choose to live and to just go on.
Yeah. So here's how I'll end this. Life is really hard, and there's just no easy journey. I've not heard of the person who got married and just had an easy 60-year marriage with no issues. I've not heard of the parent who was blessed to have children and it was just an endless slope of nachas, a flow of joy and blessing, and there was just no issues. To be married is to work your way through problems. To have kids, to be blessed with kids, is to work your way through problems. I've not heard of the person who has a purpose-driven life, who has a mission, whether it's a church, synagogue, or mosque, or whatever cause, where it's just easy street. By definition, it's always friction, it's always bumping up against problems, trying to overcome and trying to transcend and trying to grow and trying to lift up. So and the same thing is true with Israel and the Jewish story from the beginning being the biblical period and in late 19th century with the recreation of the state of Israel and all the ways of Zionism, etc. It's always been a challenge. And it feels to me that the lesson of Na'aseh Nishma is that we're judged in life by our ability to persevere with the commitments that matter the most to us. Not because they're easy, but because they're difficult. We know they're going to be difficult, and that's why we do it, because they're difficult and worthy, and that's why we do it. Marriage is difficult and worthy, and that's why we do it. Bringing kids into the world is difficult and worthy, and that's why we do it. Israel is difficult and worthy, and that's why we do it. Na'aseh Nishma tells us, keep on keeping on, because we're judged in life by whether we can keep on keeping on when keeping on is really hard, but worthy. Shabbat Shalom and enjoy the Super Bowl.